Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Erika, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
I'm so delighted to have the two of you. I'm not going to say who's on the screen. You got to go over to YouTube and watch this. But we have Callie is visiting us, your beautiful dog.
Our Chief Happiness Officer.
Absolutely. You know, anytime I go into a business that has a cat or a dog, I get so excited. I follow this cat on Insta or on YouTube, whatever, that it works at a Home Depot, and everybody goes and visits this cat, and I always think it's so wonderful.
So I want to move to a town where they elect dogs for mayor.
Right.
Run. I mean, I didn't realize that there's actually a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's like a handful of dog mayors.
I think it is interesting, and I think it says something about the town, you know, like
Yeah, I think it says something about mayors.
that, but I also think it's sort of like there's some kind of group ethos that like we can have a dog mayor because we can all get together and have conversations. I think if things fall apart, they're going to have to elect a human mayor. But I think I mean, I don't know. This is from the outside, and if you
Listen,
have a dog mayor, you can correct me.
at this point in time, I've seen the decisions that humans have made, and I'm going to go with the dogs.
Well, Erika, before we get to what you're doing now, I was wondering if you could tell us about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Oh God, it was awful. I had a lot of not good ones. The first one I ever had, I was a counselor, like a CIT at a summer camp in the Hamptons. Um, and then like the kids are just such cool parents. Like Christy Brinkley was a mom of someone in my group, and the manager for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And this is when the Zephyr album came out. So like I had it first because I babysat them. But high standards for unpaid laborers.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, kept canceling. I did that for a couple of summers. I loved it. And it was also extremely exhausting. And the pay is very low. But there's such an interesting thing to do when you're young to
Yeah.
work with people you're just a little bit older than.
Yeah.
So where'd you go after that?
Um, my first like college job, we had a bunch of weird internships for like high school and stuff, working for like a holding company in Metro Park, New Jersey. And like then I had some really great internships at like Glamour magazine and the Tyra Banks show. And so like my life started to get better. But job in college, I was a terrible employee. So actually the reason I became an entrepreneur is because I was fired from every job I've ever had. Um, and so I had short stints that never really lasted more than 5 or 6 weeks at restaurants where I would run cartel host stands, and it didn't matter if you had a reservation if you had money. And so like 20, you'd still have to wait. 50, I'd find you a table. 100, you sat right down.
Well, I have done this for quite some time now, 150 episodes. I have never had anybody be honest and say, it was me, right? I was not a good employee. So looking back now, what what do you think was going on with you or with the systems you were in?
I have a very thin respect for authority of any kind,
Mm.
including myself. And, no, honestly, I think it's why I like to solve the problems that I solve with Prospr and with any business that I've ever touched, where it's like, okay, I hear you that you're doing it that way, but have you ever stopped to ask yourself why?
Mhm.
Right? So I think that was something that was ingrained in me early and encouraged in me by my parents. I think a lot of times you see kids asking why, and they go, you ask why one more time, like you're,
Yeah.
but that wasn't how I was raised, right?
Mm.
And much to my benefit. So I think I've consistently always been in sort of operationalized environments where I'd see the way things were done. And, if I had disagreements, I have many qualms in making them known.
Right.
Often by way of just doing it my way. Anyway, one of my first jobs outside of college that I also got fired from, I was a receptionist in an Upper West Side apartment building. And we were getting all of these Con Ed bills, like endless amounts of Con Ed bills. And they wanted me to open the mail, scan the document, file it on the computer, and then file it in this filing room. And finally, I just had enough. I said, you got to pick one because this is idiotic. Like I'm
Yeah.
spending I had paper cuts. I was like, I'm not going to do both.
Mhm.
So if you want to scan it in the computer, I'll do that. If you want it in the filing room, I'll do that.
That is so interesting because I think most places that we go, there's something or some things about the organizational structure or colleagues or management that just rubs us the wrong way. We think it's inefficient, or sometimes just we don't like it at all. And yet, many people are able to just go along with it, or it's like you get dulled down after a while. But there is something to, this really, strong sense of self and strong sense of I'm just not going to waste my time, even if I'm getting paid to do this. That's not what I want. That's not the quality of life that I want. That's not what I want to be spending my time doing. And so I'll go on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think my fiance would much prefer that I was the latter, but unfortunately,
Well, I think that, we're whole people. And so all of the wonderful things about how you are an entrepreneur and what you accomplish for people is because of who you are, right? Because of what you
totally.
see and and so I'm sure he
Yeah.
is glad that you are the way you are.
He's in the other room. We could ask. Um, no, but I think realistically, if I was comfortable just doing things the way that they've always been done, right, I would still be texting my employees or sending them emails and not knowing who got it and frustrated all the time with hearing, I don't know, and nobody told me, and thinking, well, that's just what operations is. That's how, that's just what employee relationships are. And it's like, well, why?
Hmm.
Right? Like you have this concept of accountability in the organization with zero way to actually execute it. So that's fabulous that it's a value that you have and a mission statement that's on the board somewhere in the back, but like you don't have tools to execute it. It's just
Yeah, meaningless platitudes. As you were
right.
talking, I was thinking about like being mired in like muck and so much. Like we hire somebody to do a job, we've got a mission, and then we shackle them within a particular institution. Well, we do it this way. You've got to go through this chain. And I understand that we do need systems in place. But when we are told just to shut up and do it, right? Don't question the system because this is the way things operate here. And it seems like we're shooting ourselves in the foot because that perspective of a new employee can tell us so much about what's working, what's not working because of the
Whiteout came
ease.
from a typist,
Wow. Yeah.
right? So like if you're not putting your employees in positions where they actually have um guided autonomy, right?
Hmm.
Because I also have a pretty firm belief that if you are asking frontline labor to tap into critical thinking, then you're not doing your job as leader,
Yeah.
right? Like there's got to be some acknowledgement, and it's not because they can't critically think outside of work, right? They're
Yeah.
capable,
Hmm.
but it's that you can't say, hey, this is a minimum wage job, and you've got to figure it out.
Hmm.
Right. So like I have a pretty strong ethos that the pay grade has to match the expectation.
Mm.
And oftentimes we bring frontline in and we expect them to do guest service, facilities, uh, employees, right? Like employee expectations, guest expectations, manage the facility, manage the customer service interactions, in many cases put themselves in sometimes harm's way when you see all the craziness that's gone on and people just walking into fast casual restaurants and creating havoc, right?
Hmm.
Or holding them
Hmm.
up, or right, like as and it's a whole separate conversation. Plus the brand values, plus be there on time, plus, right? Like all of these things. And you go, okay, well, have you ever thought that maybe you're just expecting too much, right? And then they're expected to manage 17 different apps for checklists and one for communication and one for email, right? It's just, I think we need to be more realistic about what our job is as a leader. And I think where I stand is that like you can lead people to water, but you can't force them to drink. And
Mhm.
the only way that you can really lead someone to water is providing the pool.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what Prospr strives to be, essentially. It's where all of your resources are. It's where all of your communication is going to be. It's where you can have shift flexibility because you can pick things up and swap with your peers and right, find extra work if you need extra money and you can see something, say something, and take a picture in an organized manner. Um, and without giving people really easy access to democratized information, you're just asking too much.
I love that. I love that you're saying that we're asking too much because a lot of the narrative is people don't want to work. They're not showing up. They don't want to work. And I don't think that's what it is. I mean, there are bad actors, bad apples everywhere, whatever. But most people are just overwhelmed. They're overworked. They are told to do a million things. And as you said, not given the tools. So tell us about your company and how and the origin of it.
So the origin story is the first company I built scaled across 4 states. We had hit 21 stores, a couple hundred employees, and life just was pretty miserable. Right? We would sit around in marketing meetings or in execution meetings or operational meetings. We'd come up with we believed was brilliant. And then we'd actually walk the stores, and no one on the ground knew anything that was going on whatsoever. And we realized that there was just this huge breakdown between how we were operating in corporate using things like Google and email and spreadsheets, and where our employees lived, which was frankly on their phone.
Mhm.
And so we needed to A, connect the dots and B, support our middle management because they were burnt out and turning over like crazy because they said, hey, I didn't sign up to be an adult babysitter.
Mhm.
And I'm spending most of my time following up. Did you know? When I have a problem, all I hear is, I don't know, nobody told me. And I have nowhere to go with that. What am I supposed to do? Call them a liar?
Mhm.
Right. And so we built a lot of different tools, the first of which was a call and response system that actually will text employees up to 90 minutes before their shift and say, hey, reminder, you're working at Tribeca today, because especially if you have multi-unit in a congested area,
Mhm.
and people swap between stores, we had employees who would show up to the wrong place,
Mhm.
right? No fault of their own. Um, right. So this, and we also had a bunch of no call, no shows in my first business. And so this idea that we're texting people with enough time, or if they haven't gotten back to us within a 30-minute window, that's then an hour from the shift. We know based on where people work that they're either not coming or going to be late. Right. We were in a very high touch service business. Um, so we had to move books around or figure out, okay, how are we going to get that covered? And so that was sort of the first piece. Which then evolved into much more robust communication tools where you can talk to everybody, you can talk to specific groups, you get dates and timestamps of the time that they saw it. They know where to find the information, you know where to hold them accountable. And it was this idea of clearing out the muck of human capital management in a way that was really engaging and um, fun to use,
Mhm.
right? Like at this point, I talk to my friends mostly in GIF.
Mhm.
Why weren't we using those same tools at work?
Mhm. So, what has been the reception?
People love it. We see about 110% adoption from frontline teams. We have a really positive promoter score from that team member level login, which means that we're building for the people that we support. Managers are saving about 20 hours a week,
Mm. Yeah.
plus so much headache. And then from an administrator enterprise side, the compliance and liability risks that you're running, not owning your company communication, not owning your company data. I mean, we're saving one of our customers about $7 million in a lawsuit right now.
Mm.
Because we were able to say, hey, actually, we have the transcript from 4 years ago from the termed manager who the suit is against and right? Like we have all of this. Here it is.
Mhm.
Right. We're able to actually provide um transparency in what is otherwise an incredibly opaque relationship between employer and employee.
I think that people really underestimate how much, if you're managing, especially if you're in middle management, how much of the time of your day is putting out fires, is dealing with these conflicts, running around, and then we wonder why there's high turnover, there's burnout. we know this is going to be the case. We know there's going to be scheduling issues. We know there's going to be, especially in different industries where there's a higher turnover, the onboarding and all of these different sorts of, we know this. So since we know it, why are we not acting for our own good and their good, which then of course goes into the consumer as well.
Well, there is this idea of operators that managing people is hard. It's the way it's always been, so it's the way it has to be. Right? Yes, the binders are chaotic. And yes, the text message chains suck. And yes, nobody responds to my emails, but this is how I've always done it.
Mm.
And then I think there is some reluctance to investing in your front line, um, even if the result is that it is going to reduce turnover and boost retention
Mhm.
because they turn over so much.
Mm.
Right. And I always say to people who say to me, well, what if I like, spend all this money and give them all these tools and they still leave me?
Mhm.
I go, okay, well, think about the employees that are standing there now interacting with your customers that don't know anything and can't get information. And imagine that you don't invest in them and they don't leave you.
Yeah. Right.
That's going to be so much worse.
Right. People, no matter where they are in their career trajectory, they want their real problem solved. They want to be seen as a person. When they have scheduling issues, when they have whatever it might be, or, the ability to, if I
I
see a
think it's a pretty
problem,
fair ask for a person to want to be seen as a person.
right, right. And the more we humanize and really treat adults as adults, the better everybody is off. They are, the organization, the community,
Like the
society.
second I see a company start looking at recognition software that tries to goat their employees with like a sweatshirt or a Stanley Cup, I
Mm.
go, if your employees are only doing the things you've asked them to do because they're getting a notebook with your name on it, like you've already missed the mark. You were already so
Yeah,
far gone.
yeah, yeah. The pizza party
Because the next
syndrome.
guy's going to offer them an iPod, and right, that's
Right.
just a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, how do we encourage everyone to show up and be a professional?
Here's
Everyone.
another one, right? Like the gamification of adult work
Hmm.
is so diminishing to me. I have such a problem with it because
Yeah.
you're really sending two messages, which is that, you know, we expect you to show up as a professional. We want to treat you like one.
Hmm.
However,
Hmm.
you know, complete tic-tac-toe
Hmm. Right.
to get the, I mean, it's crazy.
So when you think about your history of work and the different experiences that you have had, can you tell us about a conflict you've had and how you resolved it and maybe how you might do something differently now, or if you would do anything differently now?
So, not to go back to my days as a receptionist, but at some point they said, well, no, you have to do both. So I just started throwing out the Con Ed, started tossing them in the garbage. And so then they didn't get scanned or filed. Um,
Probably not the best way to develop your professionalism, but
I
it's
was
a
like,
real
okay,
reaction that
I feel
people
like I gave
have.
you guys fair options.
Yeah.
Um, more realistically, you know, when I was managing frontline teams, I'm pretty proud of the way we handled certain conflicts because we were an incredibly people first organization,
Mm.
which sometimes, right, like we had this incredible employee who all of a sudden really started slipping, no calling and no showing, and showing up late and showing up out of uniform and have, right, like all of a sudden just behavior radically changed to the point where I had to pull her aside and say, like, hey, like, what's going on? Turned out she had lost her housing, and the reason that she was all over the place in the mornings is because she was now in the shelter system.
Mm.
And the way the city shelter system worked is that it wasn't permanent housing. So every single night you'd have to go and you didn't know exactly where you were going to be. And so she
Mm.
was unable to start planning her commute in the morning. Right. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay. Within 72 hours, we were able to help her with permanent housing. We were able to front her. a security deposit and first month's rent. We were able to figure out how that was going to get paid back over time in a way that she was comfortable with, right? Like if you talk to your employees versus being like, oh my goodness, this person really went off the deep end, they've got to go.
Hmm.
Right? Instead, we're able to genuinely change somebody's life,
Yeah.
right? And for the business, to the tune of, $1,500, right?
Yeah.
Which, thank God, most businesses, I think, if you're going broke, it's not over 1,500 bucks,
Yeah.
right? But, so we were able to step in and be of genuine help to somebody who then stayed with us forever, you know, went above and beyond always, had friends that she had met, and we were in the beauty business, but in hair school, always was referring incredible talent. You know, it's those sorts of things that spread in an employee base, right?
Hmm.
Like, are you just saying that you're employee first, or like really, when push comes to shove, will you put your money where your mouth is? Like, do you care?
Yeah.
And it's those sorts of things that, you know, we only help this one person, but it spread to all hundred of them,
Yeah.
not in an embarrassing way, but in a, hey, I was in a tight spot and I was able to come to them and they really helped me resolve it for my own betterment.
Yeah. We're all watching, the leaders say one thing, but what are they actually doing? And if you want to know if you're a people first organization, you don't look at what's written on the wall. It's what do the frontline workers say? What is their experience? How do they feel? Or what do they do? Such as the best word of mouth is from your customers, your employees who say, hey, come work here. Or don't go there don't ever go there. You would not want to work there.
The idea of feedbacking and surveys and just asking your employees, right? So in Prospr, if you have 5,000 employees with one click, you can send out a poll to all of them, right? And get that feedback without having it go through store managers and what they heard, and then the district manager, and maybe the 70% that they remembered, and then they're right. So it's
Hmm.
this idea that you have to connect HQ to frontline.
Hmm.
You have to have clean lines of communication. Because you're playing games of telephone, like information's going to get watered down both ways.
Hmm. So how do you bridge the gap of there's this with mechanization and AI and these tools that can be very helpful, but we can also then, especially if the larger workforce, turn them into numbers. Three strikes and you're out. So this person was late three times, or they didn't their no show three times. That's it. Those are the rules. They apply to everyone. How do you help people bridge that gap of being people first and yet being able to use these tools?
Still running a business, right? Like, I think you have to look at it in context. If the employee that I had mentioned before started that shaky,
Right.
right? It would have been a
Yeah.
pretty
Hmm.
fast week of which they were employed by us,
Yeah.
right? So I think you have to take it into context of who that person is. And if that is atypical of the employee that you knew them to be, ask why something's changed,
Hmm.
right? If somebody comes in the first 14 days, they're no, right? Like,
Yeah.
they don't show up three times, they should not be a part of your organization, period.
Yeah.
But someone who's been there for, years, that customers love, that you've known to have a different work ethic, ask.
Hmm. And part of leadership, right, is noticing, right? And leadership is messy. It's the people business. So, when we think about excellent leadership, the leader helps people get things done, but they also help flourish, help people nurture people, see them, because when we see people, they're going to be more likely to be engaged instead of quiet quitting or whatever it might be, right? And so you get this engagement. So what do you see as your own leadership style and as you have developed over the years about how to really speak into people's lives so that they flourish?
Hmm. I think it's something I'm still working on personally.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that we have very little tolerance for in our business is any version of reality that's not the truth,
Mm,
right? Because the truth we can deal with. I forgot this went sideways. Cool. These are problems we know how to solve. Anything outside of the 100% like most brutal version of the truth, um, we just don't have patience for it because it's like now I'm managing, you know, something that's not even 25% the thing that I should be worried about or caring about or focusing on. And so, I think we try to have radical candor,
mhm.
which by the way, as a leadership style, is not for everyone.
This is true.
Right? Like we've had people that just say, you're too direct or this isn't for me. And
Right.
that's cool.
Hmm.
That's fine. Right? Like I think as a leader, you have to be okay with not being everybody's cup of tea
Right.
and finding the people that are going to be a cultural fit for your organization, for the goals that you have for yourself and the team, and the way that you want to approach getting them.
Yeah, I think that's really true. When we try to be everything to everyone, then most people are dissatisfied. We are not in charge of how anybody else shows up or their emotional responses. We're only in charge of how we show up and how we are kind. And kindness does not mean, you know, actual kindness is telling people the truth, having standards, and holding people to those standards because then everybody thrives.
Yes, you'll get no bite from me.
So when you think about your career, does anybody stand out as a mentor, either a colleague or a boss that you've had? And if so, what did you learn from them?
Unfortunately, she actually passed, but it was Julia Sutton, who was the COO at Exhale.
Mm-hmm.
And she was someone who gave me a first opportunity to build something. And she just had really exacting standards. But the thing that I loved about her is that no matter how high she set the bar, she always made herself super available to help. I was like, this is what I expect, but I'm here. Here's my cell phone number. Text me, email me. I don't think that there was ever a time that it took more than 7 minutes for her to get back to me.
Mm. Wow.
And so this was idea of like, you do it right the first time because you have me to guide you and you can ask as many questions as you want.
Mm.
And she took chances and she took chances on people, including me.
Mm. That is so empowering. Like, how do we develop confidence? People at all different developmental stages of different kind of confidence, but one way that you can as a leader is by seeing something in somebody and giving them the opportunity. But as you've said, it's not just go do it and then it's just crickets into the void, but actually being there as a resource. And so it's up to you whether or not you use that resource. It's up to you whether or not you deliver. But having the opportunity um, to do it and then the opportunity to be mentored through is such a gift.
Yeah, totally.
So on the flip side of that is we all make mistakes. It's part of the human condition. And if we have an organization that doesn't tolerate mistakes, that means there'll be more mistakes because people won't own up to it,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So, how do you understand having high standards and reconciling with the fact that people are human, they make mistakes, they have bad days?
As long as you're honest about them, who cares?
Hmm.
Right? Like mistakes, mishaps, all of it can be handled. It's just you need to be honest about what it is, the challenge in front of you.
Hmm.
I can't solve something that I don't know exists.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help you solve something that you haven't told me.
Yeah. Which is so, when I think about conflict, because that's what I do for a living, so much of it is the dialogue. We go into an organization and we expect others are reading our minds, and that everybody knows that person's bullying me, or everybody knows this, or everybody knows that. What have you done? What have you said? How have you had a conversation? How have you articulated to your boss, to your colleague, that you are having a particular problem with the behavior? And if you haven't, there's no wonder things aren't changing, right? And so, encouraging a culture of dialogue, psychological safety is this belief that I can speak up without fear of retribution, which means there's a culture rich in dialogue. And dialogue doesn't mean that just because I say it, you're going to do it, right? But it's that I want to hear what you have to say because together we're better.
Exactly. It's a dialogue, not a dictatorship.
Yeah. And I imagine in building these sorts of products, you need all the feedback that you can get. And if you have a team member that's holding back out of some kind of fear or lack of confidence, then the product won't be as good, the services won't be as good because we hire people so that they will be participatory.
You hope.
So what are the kinds of things that you do to encourage your team to speak up, even if what they're speaking up might feel difficult for them because maybe it's going against the grain?
I mean, I really think that it's just
Hmm.
being open and available.
Yeah, that is, I mean, what else really is there? Being
Yeah.
open, being,
I don't have to like everything that's going to come out of your mouth, but I'll listen to it.
yeah,
And I'll,
right,
and I'll, right? And like, and by the way, just because you've said something doesn't mean anything's going to change,
right.
right? But like, I hear you.
Hmm.
I have my own set of priorities, and I think that sharing what your priorities are as a leader at the top
Hmm.
is probably the most important thing because it doesn't mean that your idea is wrong or not good or that your feelings aren't valid.
Right.
It's just fortunately they don't align with the larger priority of what the business needs.
That's right. And that's why communication is so important.
And so like, thank you for voicing this.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's wow, it's brilliant and like, yes, let's implement this. And sometimes it's heard.
Hmm.
Thank you for sharing. And we're going to keep moving the way that we were.
Right. Because people have they see different things, right? And so
Yes.
this person who maybe the frontline or middle management or somebody else on your team sees something and they say, oh, this is what we need to do, but they don't know what you've got coming down the pipeline.
I do think it's important to share why,
Hmm. Yes.
right? If something is changing because someone has a feeling of certain something, right? Like, here's why this is a good idea and why this is going to be implemented or why this is going to be integrated. And conversely, like, thank you for sharing, and here's why
Yeah.
this doesn't fit into the roadmap or why this doesn't fit into what we're trying to accomplish at this moment in time.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing worse than asking for feedback or saying we're open, we want to hear what you have to say. Then somebody says something and nothing happens. I mean, a part of having an adult workforce is dealing with things that we don't like, not getting our way, but true collaboration, which is the name of the game these days, is being able to say it. And then we ought to have some kind of feedback. If I can't get to it right now, or no for these reasons. But the more we give people reasons, even if you give me a reason, I don't particularly like your reason, but at least I know, and you've
No,
said something to me, and now that's for me to figure out and move on,
totally.
you know?
Exactly. Right. And I think, you know, anything more than just a blanketed no, or anything more than like, oh, there's not even a way for me to express myself is a win.
Hmm.
And the more you can include your employees in what your plans are and what the culture is and the why behind things, I think people are much more apt to do things if you've answered for them. Like it would have been great for me as an employee if you answered, why am I doing it this way?
Right.
Right. And because I asked,
Right.
I said, why do I have to, why? Nobody really had any answer other than, well, he wants both. He doesn't want to throw away the paper and he also wants it on his computer because we need to send them out sometimes and it's much easier to have them like that.
Yeah.
Right. So there was never like so including your team and why this is important,
Hmm.
I think really motivates people to at least conceptually understand like, okay, this is kind of annoying, but here's why I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I think also when we articulate the why, it gives us an opportunity to say, well, why am I doing this? And so back to this example of the dual, paper, that's a change in understanding of, but if that person was a little bit more reflective, we could say, oh, this is busy work. Or if it isn't busy work, if there's the organization is going to suffer or prosper for doing it one or the other ways, then it can be articulated. But it's also always an opportunity to really think we've been doing it this way. If we've been doing it this way for any extended amount of time, we should be asking that question, why? Especially if somebody comes up with a counter position, to be able to articulate, well, this is what we need to do, and this is why. And the why is just if we want to empower individuals, we want to treat people like adults, this why is very important.
Yeah, agreed.
And
Right. Like if
yeah.
Yeah, adults need to know. Children need to know. Everyone needs to know.
Everyone needs to know. And we can ask that from our workers too to articulate what's going on. This reciprocity of curiosity is a way to humanize. And it doesn't take that long. Sometimes people think, oh, we're going to talk this out. We don't have the time. And you don't have the time not to treat people well. I
I mean,
mean, you just don't.
you're gonna spend a lot of time continuously trying to figure out how to find people.
Right? Which is so costly. And the institutional knowledge that is lost. I mean, it's just on down the line of what happens when there is the turnover because of us, not
Yeah.
because they've got a new opportunity. There's so
Well,
much we
listen,
can do.
people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad relationships.
Yeah. I mean, that is the case. That's
Yeah.
largely the case. And that means that's good news because that means that's something that we can do organizationally. Those are conversations that we can have. Those are civility standards that we can set to
Yes.
set the conditions so that people thrive and get on with the mission of the organization.
Yeah. And ultimately, nobody is joining your organization to just create chaos for you.
Right.
Right? That's not what they walked in to do when they got hired.
Right.
Right? So if somebody walks in full of hope and optimism, and then they turn into, you know, something else,
Hmm.
you have to look at you.
Hmm.
Right? Like I always say, as a leader, I'm responsible for all of the successes and all of the failures, regardless of which ones I've touched.
Well, yeah, that's true because as the top goes, I mean, if the CEO, the president doesn't value people first, then other people won't. I mean, we want to know what is valued here, what's going to help me keep my job, move up in an organization, what really is valued here.
Yeah, sure. What are the game rules?
Yeah.
So
So my last question for you is, as we look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only are all workers treated with dignity and respect, but that people are encouraged to thrive and flourish?
I think it's already happening,
Hmm.
to be fair, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think providing tools and realistic expectations,
Mm.
um, within the context of a balanced life,
Mm.
right? Employees are not all employees all of the time,
Right.
right? That is just one very small sliver of their existence. And so making sure that you're really thinking about people holistically,
Hmm.
is what I think the future of work will look like.
I love that. That is a wonderful answer. And the product that you've developed, I think, solves so many baseline problems. I think about like Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? We've got to get all these, just the basic stuff. Who's working where, when I have the sickness, when I have this happen, when this happens. All of that basic stuff sets people up for success.
Totally.
So
Mhm.
that's wonderful that you found this problem and you've done something to work to bring about healthier work environments.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it's just been a real pleasure to talk with you today.
Right, you too. And if any of your listeners want to check us out, we are Prospr, PROSPR.work, WORK. And when you book a demo, if you mention that you heard us here, we will waive all of your onboarding and setup fees, which is about a $5,000 value. So
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for giving that offer. And definitely in the show notes, that will also be there as well.
cool.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Erica, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I absolutely love this product you've developed to help people solve a lot of their real problems. A lot of our real problems are these basic: when do I go to work? Where am I working? How can I swap shifts? And how can I have this real exchange of information for whether you are on the front line or you are the manager. So thank you so much for working on this project. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you haven't had a chance to check out my latest book, How to be unprofessional at work, tips to ensure failure. It's 80 tips of what not to do and considers what we ought to do instead to have healthy work environments. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Till next time, take care.